is king! Christ is king! Christ is king!
Let all that you do be done in love. A Christian, when they see their society collapsing around them, doesn't cower or run in fear. He doesn't stick his head in the sand and hope that it will all change and just go away and be all right. He doesn't throw up his hands and say all is lost. A true man, when he sees a challenge, he rises to the challenge. He digs deep within his own soul to find the strength to do what is necessary to meet the challenge in front of him. And this is what, as Christians, we are called to do. That means that when we see our society collapsing around us, we don't run away. We don't go and join the opposition as Andrew Tate did. We don't despair. No, as Christians, we stand up for that which is good and true and noble. The tutelage of our Lord Jesus Christ calls us to bear our cross and to suffer in his way.
All right, thank you for coming, everyone, for this important talk. I was going to title it something like, How Islam Harams Women, but I thought the dad joke would scare people away. So I just went with a normal, simple title here. But this is an important talk because if you spent any time on social media, you're probably being lied to by many female influencers like the likes of Lily J, telling you that Islam is the greatest thing ever for women. Or if you talk to the liberal media, you'll hear that Muhammad was the greatest feminist of all time. He loved women and was all into equal rights. And anyone who tells you this has not looked at A, the Islamic sources, and B, the sociological research. So I did the hard work for them since they don't want to. And so I'm going to present a lot of studies here to show, because we're often told that Islam is a religion of peace. It's about promoting the love of women and elevating them higher status and giving them more power. And when we push back and go, well, no, we see women in the Islamic world oppressed, we see them being beat down, they go, that is fake news. That's just the lies of the right-wing media telling us all this stuff. Your Christians are lying. Well, what I'm going to give you today is actual studies. So when you can go to a Muslim and they are like, and you say, hey, you know, in Islam, it encourages the beating of women. And they're going to go, that's a lie. Well, no, here's a study that found that association. So I found a bunch of studies showing this kinds of things. So we're going to go through a lot of different things here. We're going to start by looking at the Muslim sources, though, just to get a refresher here about what it actually says, because this is important. Now, I apologize if those are hard to read. I wanted to give the screenshots. Had I known the screen was going to be so small, I would have used something a little bit different. But I'll just read these to you. So, Surah 2:23, your wives are a farmland or tilth for you, so approach them as you please. And what I love about what the Muslims do is they add the word in here, approach them consensually as you please. But that word is in brackets because it's not actually in the Arabic. See the lies? It doesn't actually say that. Now, they would argue from hadiths or other places that, yeah, you approach them consensually, but that's not actually in the Qur'an. So that needs to be noted. Plus, we also see in the hadith, Sahih Muslim, says, when a man invites his wife to his bed and she does not come, and he, the husband, spends the sight being angry with her, the angels curse her until morning. So remember, ladies, if you don't sleep with your husband when he wants, the angels curse you. So quite a guilt trip for something like that. We also see Muhammad said that isn't a woman equal to the half of that of a man? The woman replied, yes. He said, this is because of the deficiency of a woman's mind. That's in Sahih al-Bukhari. Okay, so remember, ladies, you are half of a man in Islam. We also see, for example, Surah 4:34, that men are allowed to hit women. Okay, it says that if you have a disagreement with a woman, your wife, okay, you first, you strongly correct her, then you leave her out of the bed. She cannot share a bed. And then it says in the translation, then you discipline them, and in brackets, gently. But what I highlighted is to make sure you see the Arabic above where it says, you strike them. That's what it actually says. But notice the deceitful translations and what they do here. We also see Aisha complaining later in Sahih al-Bukhari 5825 that a Muslim man brought his wife and her skin was greener than her clothes because of how much he was hitting her. And never once in this hadith does Muhammad correct them. Don't hit your wives. Come on, guys, this is ridiculous. That's just like a side note. He gets to the real issue later in the hadith. But this is just sort of mentioned like off the cuff. So that obviously wasn't an issue. He was allowed to hit her. Okay, that was never brought up as like, don't hit your wife because it's in the Qur'an, as I just showed you. What else do we see? Well, we see in this hadith, we see, for example, a very interesting story. We all know the story that Muhammad was having sex with his slave girl, Mary the Copt, and he decided to have sex with her in one of his wives' beds, and he got caught. Silly Muhammad, didn't see that one coming with all his prophetic skills. And they made his two wives, Aisha and Hafsa, made him swear by Allah he would never do that again. You know, the whole story is just filled with problems to begin with. Wait a minute, you have a slave girl? But I mean, like, what they're saying, the issue that the wives have, at least don't sleep with your slave girl in our beds. But then, lo and behold, lucky old Muhammad gets a revelation just then and there. What are the odds? What are the chances? And Allah tells him to go back on his promise, on his vow. Boy, wasn't he lucky. And of course, then we see this in the Qur'an. Surah 66, O Prophet, why do you prohibit yourself from what Allah has made lawful to you, seeking to please your wives? Ridiculous. And Allah is all forgiving and most merciful. Yeah, they repeat that all the time. Allah has already ordained for you the way to absolve yourself from your oaths, for Allah is your guardian. So, ladies, your husband can lie to you. He can make an oath, I will never do this, I will never take my slave girl in your bed again, and then he can go back on his oath. So he's allowed to lie to you as well. Sounds great, doesn't it? I know many of you ladies have had very similar problems about your husband bringing the slave girl into your bed. I get it, I know. Luckily the Quran addresses that. He can just lie to you from now on. Yeah. Okay. Also, Surah 4:3 talks about wives, or women that Muslim men can have. Okay? So it says this. So if you fear you might fail to give orphan women their due rights, if you were to marry them, then marry other women of your choice, 2, 3, or 4. But it goes on. We like to quote the part about polygamy. Now remember though, Muhammad was allowed 9 because he was special. He was special. He was so moral, he was allowed to be super immoral by having 9 wives. It's very important. But it also goes on and says, but if you were afraid you will fail to maintain justice in taking care of your wives, then content yourselves with one or those bondwomen in your possession. So you can have 4 wives, and the slaves you can also have for your pleasure as well. Surah 4:24 continues this theme. Also forbidden to you are married women except female captives in your possession. So Muslim men cannot marry women that are already married to other men unless they're slaves, unless you own those women. Then do what you want. This is Allah's commandment to you. Lawful to you are all beyond these, as long as you seek them with wealth in legal marriage, not in fornication. So we get this idea that you still have to take care of them. But remember, if a man and a woman are married and they become slaves of a Muslim, that woman, the Muslim man can actually go after her, according to this surah here. So as Bob was saying earlier, when we don't want Islam to gain this type of superiority that it wants, this is a pretty good reason here. I mean, think about the ramifications of what an Islamic government could do. Surah 33:50 continues this. O Prophet, we have made lawful for you your wives to whom you have paid their full dowries, as well as those bondwomen in your possession. Again, Muslim men can sleep with their wives and also their slaves. Now, Muslim men like to say things like, well, it's only if they consent. They're slaves. And nowhere in any of these surahs or hadiths does it ever go, only if they consent. That's not brought up. So where are they getting this from? I don't know. They'll try to go to certain verses where it says don't force them into prostitution. But yeah, don't force them into prostitution. But you can still sleep with your slaves in Islam. Also, these hadiths, this is a very interesting one. So it says on the day of, forget how to pronounce that, Atas, we captured some women who had husbands among the idolaters. So some of the men disliked that. So Allah Most High revealed, and women already married except those who your right hand possesses. So we actually see the narrative behind the revealing of Surah 4:24 and the allowance to sleep with women they've captured. Some of the men didn't like that, but good old Allah came down and said, no, it's okay, you can still do that. So we see it sort of expanded here in this hadith. This is Sunan Abu Dawud 2155. It says the apostle of Allah sent a military expedition and then they met their enemies and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of the apostle of Allah were reluctant to have relations with the female captives because of their pagan husbands. So they're already married to pagan husbands. So Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, and all the married women are forbidden unto you, save those captives who your right hand possesses. So again, if Muslims are fighting a battle and they capture people, they're allowed to sleep with the women regardless if they're married or not, which is incredibly blood-curdling. And this is the hadith here, if you guys want to take a photo of that. Sunan Abu Dawud 2155. But we also see other hadiths as well. So Sahih al-Bukhari 4138, I entered the mosque and saw Abu Sa'id al-Khudri and sat beside him and asked him about al-Azal. He said, we went out with Allah's messengers and we received captives from among the Arab captives and we desired the women. And celibacy became hard on us. They were far away from their wives and it's hard for them to maintain. So what are they going to do? Good old Allah comes to their rescue there. They desired the women. Celibacy came hard on them. And we love to do this type of thing where it was called the pull-out method. Okay? And we said, how can we do this before asking Allah's messenger, who is present among us? We asked him and he said, it is better for you not to do so, for if any soul till the day of resurrection is predestined to exist, it will exist. So they're allowed to sleep with these captive women, even if they have husbands, but they're doing the pull-out method because they don't want to get them pregnant. And Muhammad says, yeah, don't worry about that. Allah has ordained it anyway. So everything's determined. So it's okay, just do it anyway. We see something similar in the book of marriage. Hold on, let me go back to that. This is Sahih Muslim 1438. It's same story, just told, from a different part of the sunnah there. So yeah, tons of places. But, it's not just you ladies you got to worry about. You worry about your daughters. Because Surah 65:4, they're wondering about, how can they, if a man divorces a woman, you got to wait for her to have her menstrual cycle so that you can, before she remarries, so you know that, if you get her pregnant, whose child it is. But what about women who have not menstruated yet? Good old Allah comes to the rescue. As for the women past the age of menstruation, in case you do not know, their waiting period is 3 months, and those who have not menstruated as well. So notice there's no caveat here. Like, I'm just referring to women who, may have had some sort of genetic issue and never menstruated. It's just general. That includes young girls. And of course, we see Muhammad, of course, consummated his marriage to Aisha when she was 9. Now, some Muslims will say, well, she reached puberty. There's no evidence of that. There's absolutely no evidence. In fact, research shows that girls today, reach puberty much younger due to higher rates of nutrition. In the medieval period, no girl would have reached the age of menarche until at least 11. Aisha did not reach puberty. It's naturally impossible, especially in that day and age, for that to have happened. So we also have this hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari 304. Once Allah's messenger went out, then he passed by the woman. "O woman, give alms." and I have seen the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you. So ladies, not only are you basically the property of a man in this whole life, you're probably going to go to hell anyway. I mean, it's most of people who go to hell are women in Islam. Okay? They asked, why is this so, Allah's messenger? He replied, you curse frequently and you're ungrateful to your husband. So you know those guys beating you, had their own sex slaves, multiple women. You're so ungrateful to them. I mean, it's unbelievable. Then the woman asked, O Allah's messenger, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion? He said, is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man? They replied in the affirmative. He said, this is the deficiency of her intelligence. And also, you're stupid. So in Islam, you're evil, you're stupid, you're going to hell, you're the property of a man who's allowed to run around with his lustful desires any day he wants. Additionally, we see in Sahih al-Bukhari 29, I was shown the hellfire, said the Prophet, and the majority of its dwellers were women who were ungrateful. See, ladies, not only are you going to hell when you're there, you're going to be very ungrateful that Allah sent you to hell. I don't believe it. You know, what were you thinking? You should be so grateful that Allah sent you to hell. It's unbelievable. We also can go to the Qur'an again, 4:43. O believers, do not approach prayer while intoxicated, while you're aware of what you say, nor in state of full impurity, unless you merely pass through the mosque until you have bathed. But if you are ill or on a journey, or have relieved yourself, or been intimate with your wives, and cannot find water, then purify yourself with clean water, wiping your face and hands. So here's the thing. I misspoke. I said, it actually says, then purify yourself with clean earth. Now I find this interesting, and I would be interested to get some opinions on this, but basically, if you've been intimate with your wives, clean yourself with water. You don't have water, you can use dirt. So women are dirtier than dirt if you follow the logic of this surah. It's kind of an odd thing. I don't want you coming to me to pray with after you've touched the woman. Cover yourself in dirt at least. You know, it's a little... We also see that in this hadith here, that a woman who does not have children, she is worse than a mat. It says, Umar said, a mat in a house is better than a woman who does not give birth to a child. I'm giving you a brief survey. There are so many more I could use here. I mean, this is a brief survey, okay? And of course, also we have Sahih al-Bukhari 5096. The Prophet said, after me, I have not left any trial more severe to men than women. So ladies, you're our greatest trial. You cause us so much harm and pain. Man, I'll tell you. I couldn't make this up. This is why I had to put the screenshots up. Because I didn't want anyone to be like, oh, he's exaggerating. Like, no, this is what it says. Like, so to review. Okay, and women in Islam. Okay, men, you can have sex with them whenever you want. They're your tilth. You may plow them as you please. The mind of a woman is deficient. You may punish them by striking them. Okay? You can go back on your word to your wives. So you can swear an oath and then break it because you're allowed to lie to them. You can marry up to 4 women. Women can be sex slaves if they're captured in war, even if they have a husband. Okay? You can have sexual relations with girls as young as 6 if you follow Muhammad's example. Women make up most of hell because they're deficient in religion and intelligence, and they're ungrateful. Look, I mean, for all the good things Allah has done for you. Women, if you follow the logic of that surah I mentioned earlier, women are dirtier than dirt. You're less than a mat unless you bear children. And you are the most severe trial for men. Why the hell are women converting to Islam? Exactly. We're all wondering the same thing here. It's interesting. Now, when you bring this stuff up, they'll be like, well, you misunderstood it. You mistranslated it. You didn't understand what you're talking about. Like, that's not the way that, you're supposed to read it. Well, we're going to get to some studies here in a minute. But before we do that, let's contrast that with some verses in the Bible. So remember, Genesis 1 says we are both the image of God. Now, that's important because in the ancient world, only the kings were the image of the gods. The rulers, the elites. The writer of Genesis 1 says no. Says no, both male and female equally are the image of God. Paul picks this up, of course. He says there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither slave nor free, male nor female, you're all one in Christ. So we're all equal. Now Romans 8:14, you may wonder why that's up there. For you are all led by the Spirit and are all sons of God. Now why doesn't he say sons and daughters? Well, because in the ancient Roman world, the son got the inheritance. Paul is writing to the whole church. In terms of legal matters, ladies, you are sons too. You also get the inheritance. You're just as equal in terms of that. And of course, Romans 16 mentions unia. Now, some will say, now I put up the ESV up there and it says that the unia is outstanding among the apostles. But early church fathers like John Chrysostom said that unia was an apostle. So unia wasn't a teacher sent out to do God's work. So it's not this idea that women can't teach. Unia was very clearly an early teacher. So again, when we bring up these stuff about in Islam, they often go, well, you're just mistranslating it. And by the way, they'll bring up verses in the Bible, which I don't have time to get into today. Say like, oh, look at how harmful Christianity is. Well, I mean, like, just compared to what I put up there, there's no comparison. And if you want to talk about it in the Q&A, I'm happy to go into that. But let's get into how Islam actually harms women. They'll say like, you know, you're making this stuff up. It actually doesn't harm women. Well, let's look at what scientific research has found. I think that's very, very important. Don't you agree? So we know Islam does promote polygamy. And we're told, well, this is great. You get sister wives. Like, you get a bigger family. They can help with the cooking and the cleaning. How is that bad? Well, in 2021, 2 meta-analyses came out on polygamy. Now, meta-analysis is basically sort of like a review. It takes all the studies published on a topic to find the overall trend. 2 were published in 2021, and the results were quite chilling. So the title of this study is Psychological Impact of Polygamous Marriage on Women and Children, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. They say polygamous families have distinct household problems, usually stemming from jealousy between co-wives over their husband's affections and resources, in addition to studies documenting polygamy's detrimental effects on wives' health. Researchers have identified polygamy as a risk factor for adverse child health outcomes. So not only does polygamy hurt the wives, it hurts the children of those marriages. In a qualitative study of American Muslims, a variety of ethnic backgrounds, women in polygamous relationships have reported being abused by their husbands or other wives. So we also see evidence that because of this jealousy, it leads to abuse. They noted that polygamous women had a high rate of somatization, obsessive compulsive disorder, interpersonality sensitivity, depression, anxiety, hostility, phobia, paranoia, and psychoticism. Higher than women in monogamous marriages, of course. In terms of social problems, children with polygamous parents have a higher risk of family dysfunction compared to monogamous marriages. And please, feel free to take all the pictures you want. You want these studies, you want these quotes, because you're going to need them, especially if you're debating with people online. Just bam, throw the quote. They got nothing. For school achievement, 2 studies reported children with polygamous parents had lower scores compared to monogamous parents, and a study reported that children with polygamous parents had difficulties in understanding subjects such as mathematics and English. So, again, it's affecting the children as well. We also see something came out in polygamous marriages called first wife syndrome. It had to come up with their own syndrome, where the first wife reported difficulties, faced psychological, physical, and social problems among women in polygamous marriages. This syndrome goes through a course of reaction, where the initial response from the first wife after being informed of her husband's remarriage, in the form of a nervous breakdown, emotional upset, or outburst of anger, negative attitudes towards the husband, and hostility towards the new wife exist. Ladies, you might be surprised that when a woman in a polygamous marriage finds out her husband's getting a second wife, she don't actually do that well. And typically, that second wife tends to be a little younger, which increases hostility. But that's just one study, right? Well, wrong. Okay. This study said that women in polygamous marriages had higher levels of somatization, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, interpersonal sensitivity, hostility, phobia, anxiety, yada, yada. The same stuff we saw in the other review. Likewise, similar studies on Palestinian and Syrian women show that women in polygamous marriages experience more mental health symptoms as compared to women in monogamous marriages. The intensity of psychological distress among polygamous wives can be explained by first wife syndrome. There it is again. According to this syndrome, the transition of the first wife to a state of polygamous marriages triggers a life crisis. Go figure. Okay? Polygamy is a high-tension situation triggering a neurotic anxiety, in extreme case, rather serious mental disease. Now, why is this? They note this: the family functioning of women in polygamous marriages is enhanced as women in these communities consider their communities, families, and group identity. Persons conceal their personal goals, and their behavior is governed by their admiration, dedication, and compliance to the systems of tribes, the extended family, and principles that their traditional culture or religion implement. Consequently, this kind of suppression or concealment of personal identity has been shown to give rise to mental health issues. So basically, when you're in part of these larger families, these larger groups, personal identity is squashed. You're less of an individual, you're more of a group member. And that, of course, leads to deterioration. How else does Islam harm women? Well, we also see child marriage. You might be surprised, but this is harmful. And we didn't need studies to show that, but Muslims need studies because apparently they think it's okay because Muhammad said so. So this is another review of the literature. Child marriage as a result of poverty has many adverse consequences on reproductive and sexual health of girls. These include death during childbirth, physical and sexual violence, isolation, depression, cervical cancer, and the risk of sexually transmitted diseases. Okay. It is reported that not only the mothers but also their infants are exposed to these adverse outcomes of child marriage. These include delivery of low birth weight, fetal mortality, pregnancy-related complications. You know, it's funny, when I was debating Daniel Akikachu on this, who's a Muslim apologist, hilarious debate, he had no idea what he was doing. I brought up people like Giles of Rome, who in the Middle Ages were saying things like, don't have children too young. Girls are not ready till their late teens. They produce children that are basically low birth weight or deficient. So the medieval doctors knew this. This wasn't just a modern idea. They were saying this in the Middle Ages. Kim Phillips in her book, Medieval Maidens, points this out. Like, girls were in the Middle Ages, in Europe, were marrying late teens to early 20s. Around or after 18, basically. Young mothers were reported to be 2 to 5 times more at risk of maternal mortality compared to adult mothers. Moreover, young mothers have inadequate decision-making and parenting skills and give birth to underweight or premature neonates. Okay, so not only do these poor young girls have to go through all this suffering when they bear children at young ages, they don't know how to raise them because they're still children. Their brains have not developed to the point where they're adequate at raising children. We as a society have realized basically 18 is the bare minimum to get married and have children. You should probably wait till a little after, honestly, but that's the bare minimum, honestly. According to the results of the retrieved articles, okay, so remember, articles plural. This is drawing from multiple studies. The girls involved in child marriage are at high risk of sexual and physical violence, okay, because of these uneven power dynamics. You might be surprised, but most mature men don't want to marry girls. We want women. Okay, we want a life partner, not someone we can abuse and manipulate and control. If any guy is like in their 30s and he's hitting on someone who's 16, he's probably crazy or stupid or something's wrong with his brain. You get the point here. Numerous studies have looked at intimate partner violence. This is one, for example, found, of course, you might be surprised, an association between intimate partner violence and child marriage. Because men who see children, brains are messed up, they're more likely to hit their wives. It just follows naturally. Here's another review. They know girls who are married young experience high rates of malnutrition, isolation, and depression. Girls who are married early experience high levels of depression, anxiety, and isolation than those married later, higher levels of self-harm and suicide. Early marriage is also associated with poor sexual and reproductive health. Here is another review. Okay, I'm giving you all the stuff you need so that you can just throw this at them. Take as many photos as you want. This study demonstrates that while early marriage has an extreme mental, social, and physical outcome, victims of sexual abuse show higher rates of psychiatric disorders and more severe psychiatric symptoms like depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. This was a specific study done on girls in Ethiopia. It found that the odds of suicidal thoughts were much higher on girls who were in child marriage than girls that were going to school, living normal lives, that kind of stuff. But we're told by Muslim apologists like Daniel Akikachu that no, marriage is great. We want to keep girls out of school. I kid you not, these are things he said. This is much better for them. But what do we see? No, the exact opposite is true. Oh, and also they found the study's findings are compatible with findings in the United States. So it's not just a cultural thing. Child marriages in the United States, in Muslim communities, immigrant communities, same results. It's coming from child marriage. Now this is a different study. This is not on child marriage. This is on girls who would have children very young. So 15 and under. I want you to show you this chart here. If you look at the bottom, it says maternal death. They were 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than girls 16 and over. 4 times. And of course, that's going to get worse as the age goes down. So think of 9 with Muhammad and Aisha if he would have got her pregnant. She would basically have died. Also, even if they don't die, they could risk getting an obstetric fistula. This is where tearing happens in the birth canal due to delivering a child. Something I would never want to experience because I'm a man and we have really low pain tolerance. So, yeah, very high risk of this. They note that teenagers, depending on the study, it could be 8.9 to 86% higher risk of an obstetric fistula. Pretty bad. Also, they'll say things like, well, you know, Aisha didn't get pregnant, guys. It's okay. So why are you talking about that? Well, this is an umbrella study on the mental issues we see from sexual abuse done to children. Now, an umbrella study, a meta-analysis looks at all the studies on a subject. An umbrella study looks at all the meta-analyses. So it's even bigger. It found that basically any kind of sexual abuse led to all sorts of psychiatric disorders. So things like conversion disorder, anxiety, depression, things like obesity, substance misuse, sex work, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, you name it. Like all sorts of horrible things results. There are so many studies done on this. I don't even have time to cover them all. I mean, like, no one doubts that child marriage is harmful. But Muslim communities are convinced it's okay because Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 and consummated that marriage when she was 9. This is why we see laws being passed in places like Pakistan, Iraq, allowing more child marriage. If they got power here, they would do this. The age of marriage would be lowered. Girls would be abused. They would die more in childbirth. They would develop obstetric fistulas. They would raise children inadequately because their brains have not fully developed. They would be riddled with all sorts of mental disorders and issues. Why the hell would we ever allow marriage under the age of 18? And yeah, some Western nations do, and they're wrong. Okay? I'm against any nation that has, or state, that sets an age of marriage below 18. We should be advocating in Western nations around the world, all marriage ages should be 18 or over. Period. End of story. Now, they might say things like, well, Islam doesn't actually lead to the abuse of women. We respect women. We love women. We would never abuse them. When we want women to wear the hijab, it's to protect them, because if they walk around in a t-shirt, they're just going to get abused by men on the streets. That never happens in a Muslim country, right? Yeah, wrong. Okay, so we also see a lot of abuse coming out. So intimate partner violence, that's the term you'll see in the research. If you research intimate partner violence, you'll get hits like studies, all sorts of things. This study said intimate partner violence is a major problem afflicting Muslim families, similar to any other faith community. They have also highlighted that Muslims, as a faith, culture, and socio-political community, have special and additional intersecting factors that complicate the contextual circumstances of IPV that involve their varied religious and cultural traditions. What do they find? Okay, well, they looked 3 studies conducted in Bangladesh, identified that Muslim women were more likely to experience all forms of intimate partner violence than their non-Muslim counterparts. However, a 4th study found that same differences between Muslim and non-Muslim women. So again, this is a review of literature. They review the literature to find the overall trend. So 1 study, nothing, but 3 found. Okay, that tends to mean the three are far more likely to be right because they have the same conclusion. Consistent with the Bangladesh studies, though, an Egyptian study also found Muslim women have a higher prevalence of intimate partner violence compared to their Christian counterparts. So we see an increase there in this Egyptian study. And of course, a study conducted in Saudi Arabia comparing men to women found that 30% of participating men were physically abusive towards their wives, while 34% of the women identified themselves as victims. In general, these studies found high prevalent levels of intimate partner violence among Muslims living in the US and globally. Consistent with IPV research in general, verbal and psychological abuse was found most prevalent, followed by physical, sexual, and fatal. Individual, family, and interlocking social problems, traditional beliefs, spiritual and immigration-related stressors were associated with IPV as identified by several studies. Studies on beliefs about IPV found that there tended to be higher leniency and justification of abuse in Muslim cultures than is the Western norm. Muslim men across the board tended to justify abuse more than Muslim women, except when the wife had an affair. So yes, this is actually more prevalent in Muslim countries, and we see associations with Islam. But that's just, one review, right? Well, here's another interesting paper. Results from the samples suggested that immigrant Muslim women are more likely to be affected by IPV compared to Canadian-born Muslim women. So it's funny. Muslim women that are living in Canada, who were born there, tend to experience less intimate partner violence than women that immigrated from Muslim nations. So it's like there's a cultural difference. Islam creates a culture. Canada is traditionally Christian and now secular. It produces a different culture. Women who live there tend to experience less. So Islamic culture leads to more violence when we compare it, similar things like that. I have a third study. There's so much, I'm telling you, I could go on for days. There's so much here. Muslim women reported experiencing a range of forms of domestic abuse, encompassing physical, psychological, emotional, economic, social, and sexual abuse. In terms of physical violence, women encountered various forms such as beatings, slaps, kicks, hits from their partners and from members of the family-in-law. The findings suggest that women may experience sexual assault at the hands of both their husbands and in-laws. They reported feeling hurt and angry and often expressed deep concerns for the welfare of their children. This paper also said this: studies report that polygamy and concubinage were contributing to the factors of domestic abuse. They say it is evident that religious beliefs were a strong influence on women's acceptance of domestic abuse and reluctant to leave or seek help. Religious beliefs. And remember, this is a study on Muslim women. How is this affecting women in the Muslim world, you may ask? It's not good. Not good at all. You know how women tend to live longer? What's the average age women tend to live longer than men? 5 years, about 5 years. Not in the Muslim world. No, let's not do that. No, in the Muslim world, women live on average 1.8 years longer than men. Pretty crazy. This book has a lot of very interesting stuff in it. Females in Muslim countries have substantially smaller healthy life expectancy advantage than they do in non-Muslim countries. In Muslim countries, females have healthy life expectancies that range between 3 years shorter or 6 years longer than those of males. The median is a female advantage of about 2 years. Here you can see all the countries, the different Muslim countries compared to the Western countries. And again, you can look at the 20 country average. It's about 5 years in Western countries and about 1.8, 1.6 for women in Muslim countries. Some it's even lower, like Bangladesh, Pakistan. The life expectancy is lower for women than men. Niger as well. Pretty alarming considering that it's just genetically the case that women naturally live longer than men. It's insane. Thus, females in a country with 0% Muslims are expected to have a life expectancy advantage that is 2.5 years greater than do females in a country that is 100% Muslims. In none of the results is Islam associated with better status for female relatives to males. And in most of the analyses, it is clearly correlated with inferior conditions for women. Ladies, in Muslim countries, you have inferior conditions. That's just a fact. But wait, there's more. It just keep going on. Let's talk about some additional factors. There's more. You're not, yes, I'm not done. I can't, I know. You thought there was not, no, more. Let's go back to this book, Are Muslims Distinctive? Literacy is lower in female countries. The expected female literacy rate as a percentage of the male rate is 21 percentage points higher in a country with 0% Muslims than it is in a country that is all Muslim. Here's a very interesting study I want to bring up. So I've done a lot of research on missionary activity, Christian missionary activity. I did a YouTube video called How Christianity Changed the World. And I cited like 20-some studies on how missionaries went out. They increased education, literacy rates, education, hygiene habits, economic progress. I mean, they sound like Christian apologists when you read these studies. They're basically just doing the hard work for us. Like, if I would say that stuff, people would dismiss me, but I had to get all the studies to show. Here's one of the studies I cited in that video. In places like India, Muslims had on average 15 per 1,000 literate girls. Hindus had 21 per 1,000. Christians dwarfed these numbers, 203 per 1,000 literate girls. This is going back 100 years ago or so. Okay, it's much higher now. You can see how Christianity sent missionaries into these regions. What do we see? Women start getting treated better. So what? You taught them to read. How else are they helping? Oh, there's more. This is done in Africa. So they were looking at the way that Islamic regions compared to regions that allowed missionaries in. And the Islamic regions tended to keep out the Christian missionaries. Well, Islamicized societies tended to be more hostile. All colonizers sought to avoid fighting with missionaries. So sometimes when colonizing nations in Europe would get control of Islamicized regions, they would actually keep missionaries out because the locals demanded it, and they wanted to keep the economic flow happening. So they did that kind of stuff. So Islam, some of these colonial regions kept out missionaries. But however, what actually ended up happening is West African education tended to decrease due to historic Islamic control. But in the region of the Gold Coast, where they were allowed in, 90% of students were enrolled in missionary schools. Okay? So we see that where Islam spread, it kept out education, prevented girls from educating themselves, advancing. Infant health in India. Muslim women are comparably less literate, marry at younger ages, and are less likely to work. Christian women have the highest rates of literacy in our sample, marry at older ages, and work at rates higher than those of upper caste Hindu and Muslim women. In terms of specific characteristics, Muslim women are less likely to seek prenatal care. They have earlier first birth as compared to upper caste Hindu and Christian women. Average age at first marriage is very young, about 16, and youngest among lower caste Hindu and Muslim women. Average age at first marriage for Christian women is closer to 20 years. Christian women are also significantly more likely to report having children who were large at birth. I found this interesting because what they noted is that Christian infant girls are 3.6 standard deviation taller for their age. So we tend to see results come out in terms of height. If you're being better fed, better health, you tend to have taller children. Okay, well the Christian children were actually taller, especially for the girls. With the addition of controls in location of missions, Christian girls in the full sample are 3.7 standard deviations taller, and Muslim girls are 0.215 standard deviations taller than the Hindu caste girls. So notice the dwarf. So Hindu girls are like the setting point, they're at 0. Muslim girls got about 2.15, but then Christians dwarf that with 3.7. It's not even comparable here. Finally, this is the last study I'll throw at you guys. Again, I'm giving you a bunch of stuff so you can take screenshots and use, because this is important. People were researching the hijab. What they found was that women that wanted to wear the hijab had high life satisfaction, but women that thought they were forced to, no. It says, holding this constant, women also report negative affective experiences wearing a veil when feeling like they had no choice in the matter. Perceiving no choice in wearing a veil consistently related to worse affective experiences and did not relate to life satisfaction. So when you force a woman to dress a certain way, denying her freedom of expression, lower life satisfaction, more depressive symptoms, these kinds of things. So let's review. What does Islam say about women? Well, as I said earlier, remember, you can have sex with them when you want. Okay? The mind of a woman is deficient. You may punish them by striking them. You can go back on your word to your wives. You can marry up to 4 women. Women can be sex slaves if they're captured in war. You can have sexual relations with girls as young as 6 or 9, maybe. Women make up most of hell because they're deficient in religion and intelligence. And they're ungrateful that they're there. Women, if you follow the logic of the surah I brought up, women are dirtier than dirt. You're less than a man unless you bear children. And you are the most severe trial for men. It's no wonder we see all these negative results in the studies. Look at what they say about women. Of course if you're a man in Islam, you're gonna think it's okay to hit them. They're causing you trials. They're deficient in mind, okay? They're just there to serve. They're not your equal. So of course, it makes perfect sense for these verses to lead to the results we saw. And of course, what are the results of Islam? More child marriage and its harmful consequences, more mental disorders, more intimate partner violence, less literacy, lower rates of life satisfaction, lower life expectancy, poor health outcomes, and smaller heights. In that one study I showed you, the infant health one. So I want to close on this. Let's remember what we see in Christianity. You guys remember when Hagar went into the wilderness? God found her, gave her water. What did she say? Do you remember? Mm-hmm. She said, "You are the God of seeing. Truly I have seen him who looks after me." In Islam, women are not to be seen. They're to be covered up. But in Christianity, women are seen. They are heard. They are equals. They are the image of God. This is why we see, when we compare Islam to traditional Christian societies, we see less intimate partner violence, more equality, more freedom, more literacy, better life expectancies. Clearly, one religion leads to better results for women, and Islam doesn't. So if you have any questions, I can take them now. I believe we have a mic that's going to run around, so Jack be nimble, Jack be quick.
How can you justify 18 when God chose Mary when she was 13?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How can you justify 18 when God chose Mary when she was 13?
Oh, when Mary was 13. Yeah, that didn't happen. There was a book written by Michael Satlow. Michael Satlow basically pointed out in his book on Jewish marriage in Palestine in that day and age, girls were marrying on average between their mid-teens to early 20s. Amram Troper wrote a paper as well, said late teens to early 20s. So Brent Shaw in the Roman Empire said late teens to early 20s. Keith Hopkins, same thing in the Roman Empire. We see a consistent picture. Girls in Palestine were actually marrying late teens to early 20s. Girls in Babylon were marrying early teens, according to the data. But in Palestine, late teens. So when Mary was betrothed to Joseph, we would expect her to be in her late teens, actually. So no, she was not 13, based on the research, no. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I can make them available to download, yeah. I'll put them up, what I'll do is I'll put them up on my shop for free. So if you go to inspiringphilosophy.com, go to the merch place. My slides for my debate with Lawrence Krauss are already up there. I debated him on which is better for humanity, Christianity, or secularism, and we just put the slides up there and people were downloading them, so that worked well. So I'll put them on the website, and they will be on the place of merch, and you'll just see slides under there, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for that presentation. I've heard this argument that Muhammad wasn't I don't know if I can say it, a PDF type of file that you can use because he also married
Yeah.
XYZ who are older, so so that makes him not that. So.
Yeah, this just shows how stupid they are when they use that argument. Because there are two types of, in the literature, there are two types of pedophiles. There are exclusive pedophiles and non-exclusive pedophiles. So you can be somebody who is a non-exclusive pedophile in that you're attracted to women and girls. Muhammad is a non-exclusive pedophile. That's why he was attracted to Aisha. Yeah. So point out that difference. In the actual psychological research, there are two types. Muhammad was the one, the non-exclusive. Okay, go ahead.
If I understood correctly, you mentioned that physicians in the Middle Ages recognized the dangers of early childbirth, and among them.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding. Can you slow down and speak up?
Yeah. If I understood correctly, you mentioned that physicians in the Middle Ages understood the dangers of early childbirth.
Yeah.
But didn't physicians already in antiquity, as in before Muhammad, understand that as well? Let
me get up one quote for myself to remind myself, because there was actually someone in the 2nd century AD who said this, who was like, yeah, this is bad. So I actually did this in my debate, and I brought this up in my debate with Daniel Akikachu. So his name was Cyrannus of Ephesus, and in the 2nd century he said that women too young, the orifice was too small to bear children. So long before Muhammad, they knew this was bad, yeah. And again, what do we see the average age of the time? Late teens, mid-teens, early 20s, around there. They knew girls had to develop. Muhammad didn't know that.
Thank you. So what's the response like from Muslim women when they're met with all of these hard facts?
They tend to ignore me. I think there's a lot of control. So when I respond to Muslim women and point this out, I never get responses from them. I don't think their handlers allow them to know this kind of stuff. I think, I said handler. I'm apologizing for that. So it's really unfortunate. We're trying, but there's a lot of control. It's really unfortunate. We need more women in the Christian apologetic community to talk to them, get out to them, and get this information out. So please, take photos of the slides. I'll put them up on my website later. Download them. Use this data. Heck, memorize the quotes. Memorize the studies. You need to know the research so you can throw it to wake them up. Yeah.
In your slides, you mentioned many ways in which Christianity has changed the world, in which it's improved literacy rates, particularly over the course of evangelism. Do we have any studies or comparative data between Christianity and secularism? The reason why I ask this is because if someone comes back to us and says, oh, but that's just secularism, that's just Western society, we can potentially have some actual raw data that shows the virtues of Christianity and the positive impact on the Western world.
You came to the right place. I just did.
That's why I came to your talk, bro.
I just did 4 debates in the past 6 months on this topic, which is better for humanity, Christianity, or secularism. I debated a sociologist named Phil Zuckerman. Then I debated Lawrence Krauss. Then I went on Timcast, popular podcast in the U.S. and debated it. I just in the UK debated Stephen Law on this topic on Unbelievable. We just recorded it this week. It'll be out soon. If you just go watch my debate with Lawrence Krauss, and again, the slides are on my website, I give so many reasons for the problems of secularism. Secularism leads to lower volunteering, less charity work, which ultimately leads to less community cohesion. It also leads to higher rates of depression, suicide, lower mental health. It leads to more authoritarianism, less democratic values, and it leads to low birth rates, which collapses society. So a lot of things, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, brother. So on that last question, maybe you can deal with the issue of the air we breathe. Mm-hmm. That, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
okay,
I know.
Okay. So regarding using that word pedophile, would you advise Christians who are engaging with Muslims to use that word or imply the truth?
Here, it depends on where you are. If you're in a dangerous place, don't use it. They'll start beating you up, as Jay was talking about the other day. You gotta be careful. I use it all the time. What are they gonna do to me? I live in America. I own guns. I mean, I'd like to see them try coming to my house. Americans dream of that day for home invasions. Oh, please. Oh, we've been training for those. So depends on where you are and how you are. Sometimes in your situation, it might be best to go, listen, look at all the harm. Look at all the harm this does to young girls. Look at all the harm. And don't even use the word because it's going to trigger them and set them off. Just keep showing them fact after fact after fact. and it's going to start to eat away at them. And the air we breathe, yeah, about the secularism stuff. Yeah, it very much, this idea we see in books like, there's great books like When Children Became People, Christianity and Human Rights, an Introduction, Christian Human Rights, Dominion by Tom Holland, the book you mentioned, The Air We Breathe by Glenn Screever. Everything we get from secularism that is good comes from the Christian tradition for a reason. So Christianity has been heavily influential. Now, it's not the only factor that gave rise to the West, but it's the main factor, so the point, so yeah.
I have a question and a comment. My question is, I don't know if you have a source for a practice that I have noticed in Nigeria where if Muslims, educated Muslims, live among non-Muslims, they would cover all the area around the house, and so nobody can see their wives.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a source for that in the Quran or Hadith or whatever.
I don't know, no. I think it's coming from the idea that women need to be covered and, you know, their property and all that stuff, yeah.
And my comment is about the fistula. We have that problem in Nigeria a lot.
Yep.
And it's so unfortunate because these little girls, 12, 13-year-olds, get pregnant. The baby is too big for the pelvis because the pelvis has not fully developed.
Yep.
And it compresses on their bladder and they start dripping and urine and they just smell and stink. And
yep.
It's just so sad.
It's very, very sad. And we know when the hips have fully developed for a girl. They fully develop between the ages of 15 and 17. Why do you think we grant the status of adulthood to 18 right after? Because now your body is fully matured. That just makes complete sense that it's 18, because if you're fully developed between 15 and 17, the following year you get adulthood. So.
Yeah, consent female genital mutilation. And Ayan Hirsi Ali, you heard her speak in the Albert Hall 4 weeks ago. She's now become a Christian.
Good.
Said there must be reform in Islam.
Yeah.
And she produced the film, death threats. But she's saying, you know, key figure, we've got to reform Islam. So how can we help Ayan Hirsi Ali?
Yeah, I disagree. I don't want to reform Islam. You know why? Because when a reform is going back to what the original teachings were. When we reform in Christianity, we're going back to what Jesus taught. Love thy neighbor, being a suffering servant. We don't want that in Islam because the origin of Islam is conquest, suffering, pillaging, all the hadith I mentioned earlier. What Islam needs is a transformation into something more like, you know, mysticism or something like that. So I get what she means. She wants it more like that. But we got to also remember, if we try to teach them reform, go back to the teachings of Muhammad. Please don't. No, let's spiritualize this stuff. Come on, guys. The Sufis are really right, you know. I would love to dissolve. I would love for Islam, the primary goal of Christianity, we're a kingdom-building nation. You're part of that process. Our primary goal should be to destroy every principality that stands against the glory of our God, for sure. Christ must reign until all enemies are under his feet. So let's put Islam under his feet and destroy it, absolutely. So, and again, this stuff comes out of Islam. We can't get away from it. There are some good Muslims. There are some Muslims that hate child marriage. Unfortunately, it seems as though they are the minority. So, do the math.
I was going to say, like, on the topic of, like, women in Islam, I think from personal experience and, like, from anecdotal stories, I don't know if it's, like, in studies, but I'm not sure if you have any studies on this, but with women, I know that it's, like, difficult to see the facts and, like, the evidence of how women are treated in Islam, but oftentimes women get roped into, or, like, they tend to be kind of abusers as well.
Yeah.
They allow the cycle to continue, and oftentimes they do all the hard work for the men, that the men don't even need to do any, like, abuse. It's like the mothers and the aunties, and, like, that will kind of be like the haram police and, like, persecute the girls without the men needing to do anything. So is there any studies or any, like, kind of progress that's been made in terms of reducing that? I mean,
it talks about what you said in these studies I cited earlier on physical abuse in the Muslim communities. It's in there, for sure. In terms of progress being made, the studies are only documenting the issues and finding associations and what it is. One of the themes, according to, like, this paper, for example, where is it? This one. One of the best things is exposing them to Western culture. We see abuse drop, like in this Canadian study. It's the Western culture, you know. Here's one of the things is, like, yes, the invasion of Islam into the Western Europe is a really bad thing, but sometimes there might be, God can bring, what Genesis 50:20 says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. There might be some good that comes out of this, for sure. And when the Gothic tribes were invading the Roman Empire and destroying it, what did the church do? They evangelized them and converted them. Okay, we've got neighbors on our doorsteps, let's evangelize and convert them, and we'll get women out of these horrible situations. So maybe God has brought people here so that we can convert them and change their lives, because it's not good in the Middle East. Again, life expectancy is low for women. Literacy rates are low for women. They're much better in Western nations, let's be honest. That's why they want to come here.
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that Muhammad and Aisha didn't have kids. Do you think that could be down to the fact proving that she was prepubescent? Because when girls have prepubescent sex, it actually stunts the fact they can't have kids a lot of the time through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he may have done something to her for sure. May have messed something up. Now, Muslims will say, well, no, in Islam you can't have intercourse with a woman unless you don't harm her. Okay, well, I'm going to be a little crude here. The vaginal canal of a girl at that average age is about 2.5 inches. So that means Muhammad's male member part was probably only about that big. So Muslims want to say that, oh, he didn't harm her. Well, you know what that means, guys, okay? Your prophet was not a strong man, I'll tell you that. So just keep that in mind if they want to try to say that about it. But yeah, he probably did mess her up in some way for sure. So yeah, seriously, use it in a safe place. It will drive him up a wall.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you react when Muslims say that there was no opposition? Even the Christians didn't oppose Muhammad or say anything about Muhammad when he married Aisha at the age of 9. Especially also, that he didn't allow his daughter to get married, because saying that she's too young. So obviously Muhammad knew that Aisha was capable enough for marriage at that time.
Yeah, or he was a greedy, lustful bastard. That could be the possibility as well. He was, I don't want my daughters to go through this, but I get to do whatever I want to you. It's weird, creepy stuff. The one thing I'd say is, well, that just shows he wasn't actually getting revelation from God. He was just a product of his corrupt culture of the time. The Quran says Muhammad's supposed to be an excellent moral example for humanity. All of us. Okay, no, they're admitting our point. They're admitting the Quran is wrong. He is a product of his culture and time.
I was named after his daughter, and his daughter died at 18 years old, and I think when she died, she was pregnant with her 4th child.
Yeah.
I think.
18.
And she died at 18.
Yeah, listen.
And I think I've heard one of the testimony of an ex-Muslim lady, and she was telling they were told that after the sexual intercourse with Muhammad, Aisha lost her bladder control. And these are the facts that even if you have sex with a child, definitely it will affect her other organs of the body.
Yeah.
And that when we ask those questions, these Muslim girls and ladies, whoever is coming to the Hyde Park, they have no answer for that. They don't know about it. So the deep matters of Muhammad has not been told to them.
Yeah, and that's a great comment. It almost makes you wonder that maybe Muhammad did meet an angel in a cave, just not one from above. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. I'll put the slides on the website, inspiringphilosophy.com. Thank you for coming, everyone.